It's very much a kind of a show that you need to kind of, well, not you need to, but you kind of want to kind of binge watch through and get into the whole thing. You know, I mean that's how I like to watch shows. But with this one especially, because of kind of where it sucks you into, you want to kind of keep going with it, right? Yeah.
So I actually find that when I do interviews, having only seen a couple of episodes, sometimes it's better than having seen the whole thing. Because I'm still kind of full of that kind of like what's to come.
Right,
feeling, as opposed to kind of having a full, because obviously a lot of people that would be watching these interviews haven't seen it yet or don't know much about it, so I guess I've sort of channeled their, what's the word, kind of curiosity.
I was going to say the naivety as to what's going to happen. That's true. The only thing is there's so many. The show goes after kind of episode 2 or 3 and 4 to places that you don't quite expect. Oh, nice. So I don't really know if I can tell you or not. Well, I don't know anything.
Well, I'm going to just start by just asking if you could just tell us a little bit about Nightflyers for those who don't know much about it, and how your character fits into this story.
Nightflyers is it's like a visceral, kind of gruesome horror thriller set in space, but also kind of that deals with the kind of philosophy and the kind of the ideas of trying to interact with intelligent life, or whether or not that's a good or a bad idea. And my character, Carl Brannon, is an astrophysicist who believes that intelligent life exists in the form of these things called the Vulcan, but he's the only one who actually understands how to kind of, he's trying to meet them or kind of cross their paths and what he thinks they're in the direction they're going, the trajectory. And he ostensibly is doing something he believes is for the good of humanity, but he's actually got a far more darker and more selfish motive as it goes along, which is revealed, and it kind of the show ends up kind of exploring the sort of darker vestiges of humanity and what makes people tick and how they kind of deal with extreme trauma and being surrounded by massively stressful situations.
Because I mean, your sort of agent must have come to you and said, right, this is part going to the lead role in a Netflix series, and you also just gone, yes, please. Because I mean, at the moment, it seems that anything that's got that kind of Netflix name above it is just of such a high quality.
Yeah, I mean, it does. That wasn't kind of why I was interested in the show. Actually, it was genuine to the character, because I spoke to Mike Kay, who was directing the pilot, and with Jeff, who's the showrunner, and there's the ideas that they had for the show, and like kind of. On the surface of this show, it is this really dark, gritty, convoluted, crazy journey into space. But for me, it's where the character gets pushed in the philosophies of kind of what that interprets and what that entails, and whether or not how your actions kind of affect somebody else, and how responsible you are, and what sacrifices you or the character is willing to make, and whether or not your own kind of selfish reasons supersede everybody else's, or that of humanity in the group itself.
Because it seems like a real sort of study of the human psyche, and it seems as the characters in this do have to kind of go to quite dark places within their own minds. I'm just wondering about being having to do that kind of every day for quite a while. It must have been quite sort of exhausting in some ways.
It was a little exhausting, because you kind of really have to push. You have to kind of push to places that you kind of wouldn't usually consider, and I think that's really important, because for me, what's interesting about this show and about the character, aside from it being, it's a lot of crazy fun, and I like these type of shows, and I like sci-fi in general, but trying to understand what this guy would do, and emotionally it's quite exhausting, and kind of I had to kind of go to places that I hadn't had to go to before, and kind of push the character into a really dark place, for him to actually justifiably do what he ends up doing.
And I sort of realised that, I think, are you the only sort of leading character that has to put on an accent? And if so, did you not just say to him at any point, come on, everyone else is speaking in their own voice?
I should have just fucking said that, shouldn't I? Yeah, I know. I mean, now you say that, I'm like, I don't know why I just moved my foot down. I never really thought about it too much. It just kind of happened, and I was kind of, I know. But I think that's where I kind of was trying to consider where the character was from. So kind of just kind of went with it.
Another thing that's obviously going to excite fans of this is just the words George R.R. Martin on top of all the posters, which is an instant kind of sense of sort of excitement for people. So just wondering about his involvement at all. I mean, was he ever sort of present on set? Did you speak to him at all?
No, I didn't personally. Jeff spent a lot of time with him, and Jeff, like he screened the first few episodes in Santa Fe, and Jeff spent a lot of time when he was working on the first couple episodes with George and planning out the series. He wasn't on set with us. unfortunately, but he kind of gave it his blessing, and he apparently loves the show, and he's been communicating with Jeff a lot. I think they've become very close. I didn't get to meet him, unfortunately, but
he seems quite elusive.
Yeah, he definitely is elusive. Yeah.
And obviously, I'm just also wondering. I mean, I was interviewing an actor called Martin Compston just the other day, who's in Mary Queen of Scots, and he was saying that he was riding around on horseback, wielding a big sword in the kind of Scottish Highlands, and thought this is ridiculous, this job. I'm just wondering, so many kids when they grow up want to kind of be astronauts, go to space and stuff. But it's something that not many people actually get to do. I mean, in this, just through acting, do you ever sort of look around and go, I'm kind of fulfilling these almost like quite childlike fantasies, and kind of there must be something quite playful, quite adventurous about making projects like this as well.
Yeah, Martin's right. But I did the same thing where I rode around on a horse in the middle of the forest with a sword, and I thought the exact same thing. And that was very enjoyable. And then they put you in space, and I don't know if I want to go to space. So you kind of want to be in a horse in the forest riding around. I don't really know if I particularly enjoy that. It was very stressful. But yeah, you are right. I mean, you get to explore and examine something that I wouldn't get to do otherwise. And I end up reading an awful lot of books. So I find every time I do interpret a character, I want to kind of figure out more about what that world is. That in a way becomes almost like a new learning experience, whereby otherwise I wouldn't kind of, I wouldn't end up learning what I did about astrophysics. And I listened to Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about astrophysics for dummies, and I had no idea what was going on. But that was one of the most interesting things, because you get to kind of explore something you wouldn't normally get to do. Yeah.
I mean, the film's obviously set sort of a few decades into the future. I mean, what do you change, if anything, about the kind of the subtleties of your character's sort of character traits, I suppose, in the sense that it's, if you're playing a character that's sort of 80 years into the future. So what do you change anything about the way you interact with people, or the nuances in the role as a result of the time?
I think because there's certain evolutionary aspects in the characters, like Thale. Like Thale is a telepath, and he's got these abilities which can, telekinesis, and can kill people and affect people. So that changes, I think, the dynamics between people, because he essentially is a predator, because we're all predators, and he essentially is almost a more evolved version of mankind in an interpretation of what that should be. So that's going to change the dynamics of how you interact. And later on, something else is revealed with one of the other characters in terms of what abilities they have, and that also changes. So I think there's a different kind of way that you judge people, and a different way they kind of interact in terms of from an emotional perspective, and I think people don't trust each other as much because of that, essentially,
Well, the way we're going, we'll be lucky to make it to 2095.
Yeah, we'll never get there. Yeah.
And do you believe there's a life out there? Are you someone that's quite fascinated by space and all that stuff?
I don't know. I think there definitely probably is. I just don't know if it's a good idea that we'd end up kind of engaging with it or not. I think if we did it, we might necessarily not wake up to find out about it. But I like the idea that in Area 51 there's a few little green men rocking around like Simon Pegg and Paul, kind of Nick Frost having a crack. That would make me very happy.
Yeah, and I was wondering too, because we sort of touched on this just before the interview started, but just obviously there's a whole different culture now to the way we consume television series. It used to be, I don't know, every Sunday night at 8 p.m. on BBC, and we'd wait all week for the next episode. And now, something like Nightflyers comes on, and we could feasibly do it in one weekend. Yeah. I don't know, how do you consume kind of TV, and do you quite like the way we're kind of now watching programs via sort of Netflix, and we're watching things, binge watching shows, or did you used to do you sort of miss that kind of old fashioned sort of waiting around for TV programs?
No, I kind of like it both ways. Like there was an Irish show I was just watching called Taken Down, and that came on week to week, and I did enjoy that. But I do think then when you have the possibility of watching a show all the way through, I like to get involved in the show and just kind of properly kind of lose myself in that for a period, which is what I like with the Netflix model, because you can just get engrossed in something and then be fully immersed in it. And it becomes like a really big version of a movie, doesn't it? I sometimes get a bit, not stressed, I get a bit fed up waiting for something to come out. I like when it's all there because I can then carry on and get into it. And I think it's specific. I think like comedy shows, perhaps sometimes for me, I prefer to kind of watch in and out. But I think a show like this, you want to kind of get involved in the whole tapestry of it and get lost in it, because it becomes a different mindset and you're kind of thinking about something you wouldn't usually think about. And there's an intricacy in terms of how some of the ideas you might want to kind of contemplate. So then you want to be involved in the whole show all the way through. You know?
It's also quite good. You remember everyone's kind of names and how they all fit in.
That also helps. Yeah, exactly.
Because every time I watch Game of Thrones, I sit there and just turn to my wife and say, "Who's that? What's that person called?"
I know. Yes. Like, aren't they dead? They're not already. They're back. Okay. Yeah.
And obviously, and just wondering too. So my final question really is just about the Nightflyers. Obviously, I haven't seen the whole series because it's not available to me yet. But so you might all die at the end. So this might be a stupid question, but just wondering about future series and if there's been conversations yet about potentially taking it to the series 2 or series 3.
I don't know. What I think is really interesting about this show is because it kind of there's a lovely kind of completion of the arc with this show, but it opens it up to creatively. This show could really go anywhere, but it also kind of does kind of pull a nice ribbon over some aspects of it, but then opens up even more questions. So it could go in a lot of really, really strange creative ways, and when you see the final episode, I think it should make you, if you consider whether or not if that's actually happened or whether or not that's a good or a bad thing in terms of like a reactionary concept towards everybody else who's on the ship and towards people on Earth, then it could really explode in a different kind of direction. So I think it kind of depends on kind of how people embrace it and kind of are engaged by it. You know?
Well, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed. Yeah.
Nice.
Hey,